So I wanted to answer three big questions in my life. They are, why do people suffer and what makes them happy? Two, what is something that I would feel really meaningful about to dedicate my life to? Even knowing that other people who have been so-called successful in life, some of them have quit, they retire early, they go work in the ministry, or some end up suffering, getting diseases early. And then three is the source of our feelings, our positive and negative feelings. Where does our inner energy come from? Our intrinsic feeling of morals and doing good, and our intrinsic rewards outside of external, say, monetary rewards. And how do we experience flow and things like that throughout life? So those questions kind of sat on my mind for a long time as I went about life, and my feelings were kind of all over the place. Now, when I was going through college and trying to get A's so I could get into Berkeley, I tried to get 100% on everything. And I did on some things. Sometimes I got 99%, but a lot of times I would get A's. And then as I got into Berkeley, got a couple of A pluses. So I've always been a student that is looking to be 100%. So to have my life, mentally, for example, doing schoolwork, getting 100%, and then my feelings being kind of a mixed bag of 50-50, 50% to me is unacceptable. So I thought, well, can't I apply my mind to my intellect, my IQ, to my emotional intelligence and figuring out my feelings too. So that was a task that I took on, and I surrounded myself with some people who had different feelings than what I was used to, and got to know kind of like their source and things like that. And bottom line is it kind of led towards God and the Bible. So I want to show you a couple of examples that I've come across that show the proof of God's truth is all around us. For example, when we see beauty, right, we all feel a certain way towards it, whether it's nature, looking at a night sky, looking at a forest or the ocean, or even God's creations of people, man and women. And some people think that we're here to solve problems, but I also want to say that, if we're attracted to beauty, solving a problem may be a focus on a negative. Certainly the solution, where there's elation at the end, or belief that the solution will work, provides good feelings. So I think it's more about creating happiness through belief, that in the end, good will result. Peace and happiness. Now, Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, is an interesting example because he just divorced his wife, and they had 4 kids, to be with a woman that, according to some of his text messages, made him feel alive. He called her an alive woman. And he spent $38 billion to be with this alive woman. So why would that be worth so much? You can't buy anything for $38 billion. Nothing is available on Amazon or at Walmart or online anywhere for $38 billion. So he basically thought his new wife was priceless. He would be willing to pay any price to be with her, for how she was alive, for her spirit, right? So I'm not necessarily criticizing him. What I'm trying to show is why he would be willing to, why he felt that way. Maybe he felt his relationship with Mackenzie didn't have all the spice in life that he wanted to, after so many years of marriage and kids and things like that. Maybe this new woman made him feel alive. I'm not advocating for divorce or things like that, but it really goes to show that the wealthiest man in the world who can have anything, he paid almost any price to be with an alive woman. Justin Bieber, he's another interesting example. So he was getting married to Haley Baldwin, and apparently he had a problem with sexual immorality. And he came to realize that God, what he says in the Bible is to prevent suffering. So I guess, through his short-term flings, him and his flings, would feel suffering when they're torn apart, no longer together, or, they're separated. There's loss, that feeling of of loss and not having that love and companionship anymore. So he realized that what the Bible said about marriage was true, and that marriage is about preventing suffering, because that way you're always with someone and you never have to leave them, until death do us part. Warren Buffett, he's a great example because I was looking for, examples in the, capitalistic world that we live in of business people who had applied Christian biblical ways to their business and been more successful because of it. And, I looked at various different successful people, and a lot of successful people happen to credit God. They gave glory to God for their success. And I wondered, well, shouldn't the richest man, and actually men in the world, be also believers in Christ in Christian ways? So Warren Buffett and Bill Gates are good friends. Warren Buffett actually says that he's agnostic, but his father was a pastor, and his ways, his character, is actually Christian. Because, for example, Charlie Munger, his partner, says that he has almost inhumane patience, patience being a virtue. He tries to avoid conflict, avoiding wrath, because it's a business strategy as well, because obviously the more investors that he can have, the higher the stock price, whether they are believers or non-believers, whether they have one point of view or another, whether they agree with certain investment or not. He tries to do it based on a formulaic, basically, approach of how he goes about things, looking for businesses with good cash flow that are undervalued generally, that are currently turning a profit. And, he's looking for companies that have good defenses in terms of, he likes to have a moat around them, in terms of their brand, in terms of their distribution network, in terms of their product, and their innovation in the marketplace and things like that. So he wants to have well-run companies, right? So he looks for the good qualities and characteristics in companies. And I thought, well, wouldn't that also mean he has good characteristics in himself and the people he surrounds himself with? And certainly he does. So I also wanted to find out kind of like where our feelings for, doing right and wrong come from. And certainly I've been in situations where I've felt things were pure and right, and that a good outcome would result because my whole mind, heart, and soul were into it, and I felt it was possible, and I wanted to, help the others that I was working with in that situation succeed. And several times that happened. And I was like, why are those times so fleeting? How can I have more of those times? Then I also noticed other times where, say I was about to do something that wasn't quite right or wasn't quite pure, then I would definitely feel some pushback against it internally, like a strong negative vibe, not a pure, calm vibe, but a different vibe. And so it's like, well, where does all that come from, right? It comes back to God is in all of us. Some people have misconceptions about God, and they think he's all about rules. Well, coming back to what Bieber had said, his rules are there for a reason, for our benefit, not so that we can't have fun or do what we feel like or things like that, but to prevent us from suffering or causing consequences that can lead to bad results. Let me also bring up Jeffrey Epstein. He was in the news recently. He was a quote-unquote billionaire, or multimillionaire, depending on which source, and basically in large part, I believe it was due to his deceitful ways in dealing with Leslie Wexler, who's the CEO of Victoria's Secret and several other companies. Leslie trusted him, and then I think there was some self-dealing involved in terms of real estate transactions and things like that, where at one point he was, for example, going up against Trump, and bidding on some properties. And I was like, well, how did he get all this wealth in the first place? Well, apparently he, might have created transactions in which Leslie Wexner ended up helping him profit personally off those transactions, not just on the job that he was hired to do, which was to manage his finances and help grow them. So, that speaks about deceit. And then also he had the Little Oneida Island, where he would bring young women there, sometimes under false pretenses, sometimes knowing that they were under age 18, and they would sleep with famous, rich, and powerful people in the world. And then, long story short, he ends up in jail and ends up committing suicide because he felt all his world was collapsing around him. He wasn't doing right by God, right? He was deceitful. Apparently, he ruled with anger in terms of how he controlled the girls. He had sexual immorality, so he had a heavy burden of sin upon him. And in the end, he committed suicide, lost all his money. So what good is it to gain the world in terms of riches at the expense of one's soul, right? Music, and actually soul is another concept tangentially, is Chester Bennington, who was the lead singer of Linkin Park, who I absolutely love their music. Really resonates with you, like I could really feel it. And a lot of people noticed that too. And that's why they were so successful. And then actually I was speaking to a pastor the other day, and he said one music manager that he knew would often look for bands in which they had childhood traumas because they would sing with more soul, more passion. And certainly Chester did too. And then Chester actually committed suicide as well, took his own life, and that was also due to childhood traumas related to being molested. I believe it was by his uncle. So, it's unfortunate that even when he's not the one creating the sin, he was still sinned against, and that created trauma. And that's the reason why it's sin, because it may not only create a negative outcome for the person committing the crime or the sin, but also for the person receiving it or who's affected by it. That also makes me think, for example, about the Hunter Biden situation in Ukraine, which, he's getting $50,000 to try to help the Ukrainian gas company get their funds unlocked by other governments. Now, $50,000 is a lot of money. Obviously, they hired a politician's son. And, it's not so much about criticizing him, but, it's like, obviously this gas company did something wrong in the first place. What was done wrong? Was that corrected, right? And did that go through the proper channels, right? And, what does it say when we can just put people on boards who have influence or in situations where they're trying to, create benefit for their client? And, in the result, who's really hurting? Is the gas company really change their ways? Why do they need to have this kind of influence and power on their boards in the first place? Often because it's the companies they're representing are doing wrong. So I don't want to get more into that, and it doesn't mean I'm whether Democrat or Republican. It's more about just like, why do we see these things going on in our world? People who are making a lot of money. I mean, $50,000, multiply it out by 12 months is $600,000 a year. That'll put you in the top 1% of earners in the state of California. So it was obviously really valuable. So, but we see that a lot. Apparently there's 20 what is it called? Lobbyists, people in Washington, 20 lobbyists to one politician in Washington, because there's so much money and so much influence coming through those moneyed interests that are just kind of shaping the laws versus people and our needs, and it's just wrong. We need to get money out of Washington. Money should not buy time. It should be, what the people truly need and what is also right by God, right? Because sometimes people think they know what they need, but it's not often right. It's not often sustainable. It's often a quick fix. But doing things God's way, right, will lead to long-term, sustainable, positive outcomes. We all love music too, right? We love to feel joyous. We love to dance, right? So, that's what God wants. As we create positive outcomes for everyone, we create a world of heaven on earth. We create happiness. Heaven is supposed to be fun. So, kind of coming back to the perception shift that Bieber helped me see, is that I thought that, for example, going out to dance or going to nightclubs, like I'd go, but I kind of was like, are these a waste of time? It doesn't feel productive. It's not business oriented. It's not making me money. It's costing me money, right? What are my intentions there, and all those kinds of things. And you know, I think music and understanding that what God wants is for us to enjoy life, right? They talk about joy a lot in the Bible, and it's because they want us to have a joyous life. So that starts in us, you know, and in making sure that we're right inside ourselves, in our hearts, our minds, our souls, with others, with our work. If we surround ourselves with good things and beauty and good results and things like that, it naturally feels good, right? It lifts us up, and then we feel like we're excited, we're happy, we feel like dancing and things like that. Dating sites is another interesting one. So, a lot of guys go on dating sites, and they also go on porn sites too. So, but a lot of girls say that they want long-term relationships and no hookups. So obviously, a lot of guys are going on there for the quick fix, just for what they're feeling in the moment. But if they came from their heart, they would understand that the reason why girls don't want hookups is because maybe they've been through that before, or they don't want to go through that, and they don't want to feel used and set aside, when they could be with one guy long term, continuously, instead of just one guy and then another guy and just kind of feel passed around. I mean, how would you feel if you were in that position, right? So I can understand their feelings, their deep down inner feelings for why they want long-term relationships and not hookups. Diets is another interesting one related to feelings, which is, why do diets not work? Because we think of diets and we think constriction, right? It doesn't feel like it's like flow, right? So if we feel like something, oh no, we can't have it. That's resistant energy, right? Resistant energy doesn't work, right? It has to be energy where we're open and we're drawn to something, we feel naturally pulled towards it. So, what is that bigger thing? And does that bigger thing kind of like align with, say being on a diet? Maybe it's, someone has a wedding coming up, right? That they're either, the bride or, the bridesmaids or things like that, or the groom or the groomsman, right? Then they're going to be out there, and they want to be able to fit in their dress and look nice. So my gym trainer actually said, weddings is a big one, or high school reunions, for what motivates people to actually stick on a diet and stay with it, at least for that period of time. Now, if we imagined our life, right, where for our life, I want to look like this, I want to be like this, then that might help motivate our diet. But sometimes, we see people go up and down on diets, say celebrities and things like that, right? So it's got to be kind of a whole lifestyle, like a life, like a self-image that you want to create for yourself, not just for, one-time events like a wedding or a high school reunion. Sports is another interesting one because, the true joy in sports is, for example, the fans in the stadium chanting, they're really into it, right? Competition can either feel, like friendly competitive, where you're enjoying the competition and you're doing it for fun and it's out of respect, or there can be kind of that negative competitive attitude, where it's about crushing the opponent and, hurting someone, say if it's in football or wrestling or something like that, right? Sports is always best when it's fun. Some of the times that I remember when I was a kid was playing golf with a bunch of friends on kind of the shabbiest golf course around, and we're just whacking the golf ball around, and there was probably 10, 11, 12 of us there. We had the best time. Didn't involve beer or anything like that. I think we were high school at that age, right? But it was just about a bunch of guys out there just having fun. That was the best time I remember playing sports, not when it's stressful or competitive or things like that. And oftentimes you'll see, for example, in different sports that they say, stay loose, like have fun, like things like that, even when they're under like high pressure situations. Sometimes you'll see Tiger, right? Tiger Woods, he'll get stressed out when he hits a bad shot or things like that, versus like when he looks at his best, he's, in flow, he's under control, right? He looks like a master at that point. Um, Service and putting people before profits is another one. The Bible talks about service and coming from a humble heart. That, as a business leader, for example, or as someone who works in the workplace, you know, we got to remember, the bigger picture of why we're doing it. Not just for the money, but first of all, you're in business to serve people, right? And people are going to go to the people who have the best service, the best price, the best value, right? Just because someone's cheaper doesn't necessarily mean that you work with them if they have a bad attitude or do bad work or things like that, right? You're not going to get word of mouth. You're not going to reap the rewards, over the long term. So having a humble heart is something that comes back to, kind of a characteristic I think we want to have at all times, which is, that we live in God's grace, right? That He's with us always. And if we feel and act based on what feels right in our hearts and for the long term and for the best of people in service, then how can we go wrong? It's not just about serving ourselves, but also about serving others. And it's important to consider that doing it together. I put it over here, winning. So the best kind of winning, right, is when you're winning together with other people. There's this one game that I played, the cash flow board game. And the way that my team won it, me and actually another one or two other people, partners, we got into this commercial real estate deal, and that helped us win the game amongst a whole room of people. And so that, to me, that lesson was specifically taught about winning together, winning with other people. So, some other stories, for example, in real estate, a real estate property manager, I've heard a couple stories where they say delay or won't fix or won't improve or do anything for the tenants who are living there. And then that makes the tenants not feel good, not feel cared for. It makes them feel suffering, right? Like, oh, all he cares about is money, not about people, right? All he or she. But imagine if that same property manager cared about them, took action quickly, or improved things, or was emotionally sensitive to how they felt about the situation and genuinely cared and considered it and took action when he or she could, right? Totally different way of doing business. Why does having good, clean, healthy food and having a good environment and being around positive people feel good? Because the Bible talks about eating clean food. God is about harmony, right? God is about a positive environment, right? That's why it feels good to have, a clean home, to be with, joyous people, right? Because all that is related to God's Spirit in us. That's what we resonate with. That's what we relate with. Let me jump over this side. So actually there was 3 times that I could think of when, I really felt the flow in me, and I really felt that things were going to work out, and I just had to kind of believe in it, surrender, and go with the flow. I was like, I didn't know where this is coming from, but I feel like I'm going to win. So let's start with high school. There was a Think on Your Feet competition in which we were given a bunch of different things, like there's like a paper clip and a rubber band and a piece of paper and something like that. And it said basically make a car to make it go around this corner and park in a garage. And I was like, well, how are you going to do that if you don't have a motor and things like that? So my friends, they got discouraged by it. They went off and goofed around. And I sat there and I was like, no, something is missing on this. And so I, kind of opened my mind, and I believed there would be an answer. And sure enough, when our team went up there, I saw this mouse trap and I put it upside down, and then it made it spring forward, and it jumped into the garage. Didn't have to go around. It's kind of came to me on the spot. Another time was when I worked for a company up in Washington. We played some corporate games. We had to just do team building games, and they picked me to be captain. And I just remembered thinking I've got to help these people. Let's win together, right? And then my heart was into it. and I saw all the different avenues and angles that we need to do to win. For example, one of them was like raising a bar up with our finger or something like that. Another one was like a play that we had to put together. It was silly little games like that, but we won in the end. And then also this one time when I was at a shoe store, they gave me an opportunity to spin the wheel. And I remember wanting to get a pair of shoes for the person I was with at the time. And it would be a free pair of shoes if you got on the certain wedge. And I just kind of believed in it. I set my intentions for, giving those shoes away, not for selfish purposes, but for selfless purposes. And I just felt that if I would spin it the right way, that it would land on the wedge. And it did. So I won the free shoes. So they're just like simple examples, but there's also been other examples throughout my life. And I've tried to consider, like, what is that within us? That gives us that intuition, that pureness, that feeling, that spirit that we're going to win, that the outcome is going to be good, and it's not winning at people's expense, but it's winning for God's glory, doing it in God's way, feeling that, believing that it'll work out. So let's see, togetherness. So I talked about winning together. Attitude. So this is something that came up in the Bible study group that I was in the other night. They talked about having a know-it-all attitude. So, I've certainly been guilty of that at times. And what I've realized is, like, one, that shuts me down from, say, learning more. I always want to have a curious, open-minded attitude, right? Otherwise, I'm only going to know what I currently know, not what I could know from other people or other things. For example, I was asking my Google Home the other day just a whole bunch of questions, like one after another. I was like, I'll never know everything, but certainly Google knows a lot. So I asked it a bunch of questions, and I learned a lot from the process. And then, let's see, so know-it-all attitude. Also, if you have a know-it-all attitude, it can irk people. It can feel off, right? People can find it, like, annoying, right? So people also want to be heard, right? They believe they know things. They want to be thought of as smart and capable as well. But also, I think if we come from a humble place in the first place, it should never be about, I know it all, but more just about, how can my knowledge serve you, right? How can it help you, I certainly don't know everything. Why? Because I'm learning new things every day. So let's see another one, action. So I've wrote here, believe/faith and wholehearted action. So Tony Robbins talks a lot about taking massive action. Certainly massive action was setting up my video studio and getting up the courage and guts to actually do my first video. It's literally taken probably weeks or a month. But I see a lot of other people doing videos out there, and I was like, well, how can I add to that conversation in a good way? But what I think Tony also needs to add is it's not about taking massive action, like a massive step, but also it's about wholehearted action, belief in your heart, your mind, and your soul, that action that you take will work out, right? It's not just about forcing it out of us, but believing and attracting it out of us, right? Totally different feeling, more like a gentle pull, like we're on, say, like one of those, what is it called? Not the escalator. Yeah, like kind of a walking escalator thing, on an airport, where it kind of like, gently glides you along, or you feel like attracted to some beauty, a beautiful person or something like that. You feel like naturally drawn to them, right? That's the kind of massive action you want to take. So it's just not so massive. It's big steps, right? But it's more just like, yeah, I can do this. And then just start doing it, like letting it flow, right? That's the most beautiful, graceful way. And I think that's another example of coming from the right place in our hearts and God working with us, within us, for us. So I also put here, it's about making yourself worthy. So, the reason why sometimes goals don't work, right? You can set SMART goals, specific, measurable, actionable, results-oriented, and timely, right? So those are all kind of like intellectual things, right? Specific, it's like But what does that come down to? That's about getting clarity inside yourself, inside your mind, inside your heart, inside your soul. That's why that's important. Smart. So we have M for measurable. Okay, so that's kind of numeric, but it's also to gain clarity, the feeling of it, right? Like how much money do I want to make? When do I want to get married by? Things like that. It's kind of giving yourself an inner guidance so that you can guide all your resources, your mind, thoughts, and energy towards that goal by that certain time. Um, Taking action, right? Taking massive action, like we just talked about, but also doing it from your heart, the feeling of it, the feeling of feeling and flow as you're taking action. Results oriented, right? Having a mindset that at the end it's going to work out, right? That you feel the light at the end of the tunnel. And then T, timely. So God doesn't really work based on time. He works based on, as events unfold, right? So sometimes, for example, Elon Musk is famous for this. He'll try to have a deadline when new things are released, and he'll often say his timelines are often wrong, but in the end he succeeds. So it's just more just kind of like a rough timeline to kind of give us an idea of when we're aiming for. And again, that's for the clarity. And so we're all kind of marshaling and guiding our resources in the same direction together, right? So it's a matter of the outcome in the end that matters. Time is simply kind of a guidepost. Let's see. So, in the end, ultimately, we want to have sustainable happiness together, right? If, for example, you go through a breakup, you feel suffering in your heart. If, you have a business failure, you feel suffering. So God is all about suffering and salvation, right? Right there. People before profits. Profits, benefits the people who profit, obviously, the CEO, the owners of the companies, the shareholders, things like that. But we have to remember that if we put people first, you'll actually profit more. Now, business owners sometimes maybe mistakenly think that, giving better service has to come at the expense of profits. Not always necessarily. For example, if, sometimes I won't name names, but, different grocery stores or big box stores, things like that, and they'll have 20 checkout aisles and 2 people on cashier. And then you have lines of customers that could be 5 or 6 deep. Why not have some more people at those times? Because more cashiers. Because that's going to create a good feeling of wanting to come back to that store, right? Because they're getting served better, so they're going to leave with good feelings, right? You're doing right by them. You're serving them. They're going to be like, oh, great! I was able to get in and out really quickly. Really enjoyed that experience. Next time I need something, I'll go back there because I know I can get it really quick. It's about convenience, about serving others. So that person's going to want to come back more if they feel good, and they're going to spend more, which is going to equal more profits. So that also kind of tackles care and service. Think and Grow Rich, another popular book in the business realm. So I was like, is it really all about thinking? Well, what happens sometimes is people become too intellectual and they start to overthink things, and they think they can, think through any problem and come up with any solution. But sometimes, the solution to people is often in their hearts, right? It's in their hearts and their minds and their souls, right? You also have to have that inner feeling. You have to have that feeling of belief, the feeling of being connected to one another, who we're serving, how do we want them to feel in the end, and doing it in a way where both prosper, where it's a fair trade. Money is meant to be an exchange, right? A fair exchange, and prices merely are the market prices for what people are willing to pay and what people can sell it at, right? So I think it's also got to be think, first of all, actually probably feel in your heart that things will work out, that things are profitable, right? Or that things will go well in a relationship. Feel, and then think of that feeling and connect those two together, and then grow rich. Think about how you can create value in the marketplace that is maybe better, faster, or cheaper, serves people better. People therefore come to you. You take that market share, you serve those people because you've created more value. They're happy to do business with you, and you're happy to do business with them, For example, I know like Zoom, for example, created a better product, um, compared to go to a webinar, and then they ended up just going public and making a lot of money recently. So even though there was a product in the marketplace, they still offered better value, better technology. Um, let's see. So you want to have that kind of pure thought, feeling, belief, right? Believe in a happy ending. Take action that's pure and positive, and ultimately we want to feel that flow, energy, and guidance directing us, kind of like a tractor beam, like on Star Trek, right? Like beam me up, Scotty. You want to just feel, that connection, and I'll leave you with this too. In our small group, in our church, they talked about getting your vertical relationship right first. Your connection, heart, mind, and soul with God above, because often people will disappoint. So I don't always expect myself to be perfect, but I'm trying to become more perfect in God's way, following Jesus Christ, his way every day. And that's all we can do is try to do our absolute best. If we're not doing our best, then that is sin too. And that also leads to suffering. So feel that connection with God. If you feel or think a sinful thought, let it go and focus on feeling that joy, abundance, and beauty, those positive outcomes, that things will work out, virtues, not vices, right? And then in the end, things should work out, be happy, successful, and live a long life, just like Warren Buffett. Thank you.